cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 53 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm one half of the podcast itself, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, and with me, of course, is my partner in crime.
Yep, the other half here, Santoki and Mash. It's coming to the end of 2021. You know, it's been a crazy year from all perspectives, but in terms of cricket, it's been relentless. Felt like we've had so much cricket from West Indies, so we thought, you know what? Let's put it to the fans, followers on social media. Let's get their questions in and let's just address it on a wrap-up pod today.
100%. We've called this one a special mailbag episode. It's taken us 53 episodes to realize that we could actually do a mailbag episode. Thank you to everybody who sent questions in. We've tried to narrow it down to 5 only, which we think will be lengthy conversations in and of themselves. But as Santoki says, what a year of cricket. I felt like we've barely had a break since January. We've gone from Bangladesh away to Sri Lanka at home, mini break, no, Super 50, then South Africa and Pakistan at home, then the T20 cricket in the summer, then then CPL, then the World Cup. Who was then next? Then Pakistan at home. And even now, as we're recording this, we're getting licks in Pakistan. in the white ball
Listen, the schedule was so relentless, Masha. You failed to mention, even we had to take a hiatus at one point.
Yeah, that as well. We got so burnt out, we just disappeared. Took an L like The Undertaker and just disappeared. And looked like we were never going to come back. But thanks to our good friends at the Cricketer, we've got a partnership going with them that's going to take us all the way through to the England series, the Test series, which will start and culminate in March. So look out to that and shout out the Cricketer for joining up with us ahead of that particular series. But like we said, mailbag episode and quick admin before we continue. If you want to support the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, you can do so for as little as £2, $2, whatever the currency is in the country you're from. You can support us at Patreon. It's in the description below, or whether if you're listening on the audios or if you're listening on the visuals, it's in the description below. You can support us at Patreon. You can find us at Carib Cricket, Twitter, Instagram. Our website is CaribbeanCricketPodcast.com. But most importantly of all, if you are a listener to this podcast, particularly on the audios, do leave a review and a rating because it does help the podcast grow. But Santoki, let's get right into it.
Let's go into it. So the first question we got was from one of our followers on Twitter, Chatil. He's asked us, Mash, was this cricket?
Yes. Was this one of the better years for West Indies cricket in recent years? I'm gonna let you start off on that one, Santoki.
Yeah. I think we've got to break it down because obviously each format we've had respective ups and downs, and obviously they're separate from each other. So I think the first place to start the T20s then, Mash. I guess that's a good. We had the World Cup, so we actually had context of a tournament in that format, and I think it's safe to say it was a massive disappointment. Obviously, two-time champions, defending champions, West Indies. We went into it confident. We were big and bossy on social media all year, Mash. We thought we were going to do it. It fell apart in spectacular fashion. You felt it was a gamble that didn't pay off. And at the moment, we're in a place where there's been massive changes and the team's been overhauled, as we've seen with the squad named for Pakistan. A lot of young players coming in, inexperienced players. So it's very much a rebuilding project in T20. So I think the easiest probably to start with would be the T20s because it wasn't one of the better years. It was one of the worst years for West Indies in terms of T20. But Mash, I guess it's a big topic but where do we start with this one? What do you think was the main architect for our downfall in the T20s? Was it just a gamble that didn't pay off? It's essentially picking experienced players and they just didn't pay off. at the right moment in the World Cup?
I think, boy, it's a tough one. I mean, first things first, I'm actually surprised that people didn't come for us more on social media, because when we started this podcast all the way back in September, August 2019, we told everyone we were going to win the World Cup. And we told them all the way through 2020, and we carried on with chest in 2021, saying we were going to win the World Cup. Not only did we not win, we only won one game against the only other team that was worse than us in the competition, and went home fully with our tails firmly between our legs. But to start off with your kind of intro question as to not even where did it all go wrong, or if it was a gamble that went wrong, I think I've got to put it to West Indian fans first and say, what did they expect? Did they expect us to win the World? There's lots of different layers to this. Did they expect us to win the World Cup? If they did, why did they expect that? And the answer to that question surely would be because of the players we had picked. Okay, if you follow my thinking there. If you didn't expect us to win the World Cup, what were you expecting instead? And what players did you think should have been there that would have helped us reach whatever you thought those expectations should have been? The preparation for this year's World Cup was better than our preparation for 2016, which a lot of people often forget. 1 year before the 2016 World Cup, we played a total of 2 T20 matches. Our preparation for that tournament came via all of the kind of like IPLs and franchise leagues that were going on. This year, we managed to have a total of, I think, 9 games spread across against Australia, South Africa, and Pakistan. But we effectively brought in a brand new squad. Not brand new squad, but you know what I mean, Santoki. We brought the band back together specifically for those 9 games, and pretty much wrote off CPL as being any kind of last-minute squad changer for the World Cup. So there's a lot of questions there for people I think I'm putting to people to answer, but also we're almost victims of our own success, because I go back to that initial question. I said again, you surely only considered us having a chance because of the players we included. But a lot of the criticism that the squad got was almost as if we shouldn't have included any of those players, your Gales, your Bravos, your Lendl Simmons, your Ravi Rampols. Some people even went as far as saying don't include Pollard, which made no sense, but you know what I mean. We would have stood 0 chance with a different squad, is my take on it. But like I say, it's a lot to unpick. Where do you want to go with that, Santoki?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpick. Obviously, we done a live stream show. A lot of our listeners would have seen with Ayana Holder of Barbados, where we kind of dissected this. And obviously, a massive influence was the change of venue to the UAE, where it's harder to hit boundaries. Our game was built on boundaries. But just taking it back to the year as a whole, we didn't actually have a bad year in terms of bilaterals. We obviously lost to South Africa 3-2, but then we beat Australia 4-1. Pakistan, we lost the series, but there was only 1 T20 there. So it was mixed results. There wasn't any signs that sort of we would have a terrible performance at the World Cup. But Mash, as you said there, what were the alternatives? For instance, if you didn't have Lendl Simmons or someone who didn't perform at the World Cup, if you didn't have him as opener, who else would you have? Brandon King, Shai Hope? What would they have done? Like we've seen one game in Pakistan, they've faltered. Generally, they've not really performed in the T20 format. So expecting for someone of Lendl Simmons' caliber to drop out and bringing in a Brandon King and Shai Hope, would it have been any better? Maybe, but most likely it wouldn't have. So lack of alternative options meant we had to rely on the established stars. And you had to give them the benefit of the doubt, the legacy they've created in the format. They're still players who perform. Chris Gayle, he was performing in the IPL. It wasn't if we picked him just because he was Chris Gayle. So they earned the right to be reselected. Unfortunately, it didn't pay off. So in my view, it was a high-stakes gamble that didn't pay off, essentially. And there's not really much else you can say about it. There was no one else who sort of put their hands up and said, I need to be selected. Obviously, a lot of fans afterwards were cussing out about Romario Shepherd, ODI and Smith, Dominic Drakes needing to be in the squad. But what would they have done? Their first international experience being the T20 World Cup in the UAE, which is notoriously a tough place to play. What would realistically, what would they have done? It would have been even higher and bigger a gamble to take those players instead of the likes of a Simmons, a Gale, a Pollard. I can't believe people were calling for Pollard to not go to the World Cup. So for me, it was a combination of factors, as you said. It was the environment of it being UAE, aging stars who, don't forget, the preparation initially was for the World Cup to take place in 2020. So it was a year later for a lot of players. When you factor in Gale was now 42, DJ Barber is now 37. If they were a year younger, their performances would have been slightly better, you would imagine. So it was that as well, and also just a lack of alternative options in the region. And this has sort of been a golden era. I mean, you can compare it to the Clive Lloyd Test era. Essentially, we've established a cohort of stars who have defined the format for the past 15 years. Will we replicate that again? It's very unlikely. The question is, will we get players that can step up to a sort of level where they are at a world-class standard? We're not sure. We've obviously got Poran and Hetmeyer, but they still need to develop as well. So for me, it's a lot of factors, as you said, but you can't put it down to the players solely. Obviously, they did have a role to play, but there were a lot of factors which kind of combined for our dreadful performance in the World Cup.
A lot of people, I saw a few tweets, not a lot of tweets, but a few tweets that compared our collapse to like, which World Cup was it? Spain in 2014?
Yeah, in Brazil.
What did you make of those comparisons where it was like, again, kind of just coming off the back of that last point you made, an end of an era, and you just get humbled? It's one step, almost like for that Spain squad, it was one step too far, tournament too far after Tiki-Taka had basically defined 2008, 2010, 2012. By 2014, they kind of found out a bit, and they don't have anything else in the locker to turn to. But more importantly, they also didn't really have the next generation ready to step in. Do you think that was a good comparison to make?
Yeah, I think that's a quite accurate comparison. In a way, we sort of redefined the format with our boundary hitting, soaking up the balls and hitting sixes when needed. And that high percentage of boundaries led us to glory. But the thing is, other sides learned from it, notoriously England. They learned from it and they sort of evolved the tactics, whereas we sort of stayed stagnant. And I guess it's the problem when you're successful. You don't see the need to change your team. Why would we change the team if they've won the World Cup twice before and they were performing in franchise leagues? So essentially, we got left behind. And now this is the crucial juncture. We know we're behind other sides now. We've got a very experienced side. How are we going to play catch up and take ourselves to the next level and take it above England? How are we going to evolve? Do we have the capabilities to evolve? And that's something which you want to see. Unfortunately, there's a World Cup next year, hot on the heels of this one. So in terms of developing, it's going to be very hard because you're going to have inexperienced players. Suddenly, within the next 10 months, they're going to have to step up on a world stage again. Whether they'll be ready for that, we don't know. So those are questions that which needs to be addressed in 2022.
I think the best way forward, and it's one of the actual next questions we've got coming up out of the mailbag, so I won't jump on it too much just yet, but the only thing I can foresee right now is your old Dean Smiths, your Dominic Drakes. They need to get as many bags as they can possibly get in the next year going into that next World Cup to develop their skill set. Yes, we're going to be playing as West Indies some bilateral series ahead of that World Cup, but they're not going to develop just by playing for West Indies. I mean, again, we're recording this after the first T20 versus Pakistan, and old Dean, Dominic and Romario went for licks with the ball, and that's to be expected. Don't get me wrong. Romario's not inexperienced, but the point is they're all fresh, they're all into the side, and they're going to experience a very harsh learning curve in the next few months. So it's going to be a bumpy ride for sure, which is why, as much as going back to Jatil's actual question, was this one of the better years? No, it wasn't in T20 cricket, but almost looking forward, this is why I don't think we can jettison the few of the GOATs that are left. I still think we're going to have them to help these next crop along.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And so I guess if we move on, Mash, the next one, we'll look at ODIs, although I don't think there's much to analyze. We didn't play that many ODIs. What did we play? About 9, I think. I think we played... Well, the 3 in Bangladesh, I'm not counting. Bangladesh, I'm not counting because that don't count. That was like our E team, essentially. The best of the regionals. Sri Lanka, we won 3-0. And I think we lost to Australia 2-1. In contrast to the T20s, ODIs, ironically, we have quite a settled squad. If you look at the top order, Lewis, Hope, Poran, Bravo, Holder, Pollard, it's quite settled and they sort of know their game inside out. And you got the likes of Azari Joseph, who performs well in ODIs with the ball. So for me, there could be slight improvements made in the bowling. But for me, the ODI side, there's not that much to worry about considering the World Cup's still 2 years away, the next World Cup. So that we've got a base to build from in there. So it's the polar opposite to T20s, I feel.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not certainly statistically a better year. Some will say, oh, this is one of the weaker Sri Lanka sides in ages. You shouldn't celebrate the 3-0. But that would be somebody who fails to remember the fact that we didn't win an ODI series anywhere in the world, not even at home, between 2015 and 2019. So for those keeping count at the back, that's 4 long years. So I'll take any ODI series win. I'll take any ODI individual win anywhere at any point in time, because we are coming from the lowest possible ebb in terms of ODI cricket. Obviously, we've got the 3 coming up against Pakistan, which aren't going to be easy. Again, people have kind of pulled out. Hetmeyer's not there. Lewis isn't there. Pollard isn't there, etc. So I'm not expecting much joy in Pakistan. But I'm with you, Santoki. Relatively speaking, the squad is settled. If I was going to raise any concerns, really, the ODI squad, I would be looking at, I'm not totally convinced, really, the fast bowling stock. I think, obviously, Alzari Joseph is top gun, and we got no concerns there. But I more mean the backup, the backup support to help him. And I think Shepherd and Smith are in this ODI squad in Pakistan, but there is just a few concerns that I've got about the backup pacers to support Alzari Joseph.
Yeah, it's sort of similar to the T20s. You're wondering stock to sort of prevail with our fast bowling as well. And obviously the ODI Cup's going to be in India, so develop numerous spinners. We obviously got Hussain's now integrated. Who's going to be? Are we going to try out Moti? Are we going to persist with Hayden Walsh Jr.? So those are questions long term. But overall, it's probably the least concerning of the formats, because now we move on to MASH, the main event, the test series. This is what people came for. So this time last year, we'd obviously were in the process of getting trounced by New Zealand. Michelle was busy typing up his P45 for Jason Holder as captain. But you know what? I would say our optimism going into 2021 was low, especially Bangladesh being the first assignment. Obviously, we've talked about it numerous times. Bangladesh was an historic series win, 2-0. We played Sri Lanka 0-0 on flat pitches, which was disappointment because I felt that we could have got a result against the Sri Lanka side on low confidence. It was a humbling against South Africa. We lost 2-0, blitzed by the fast bowling. And then Pakistan, which was a classic, an all-time classic, 1-1 sort of there. And then most recently, Sri Lanka, we lost. So I guess there's a lot of negativity around the test side because we got hammered in Sri Lanka. The problem is we've never won a single test in Sri Lanka. So when have we not been, even in the glory era, recent times with Brian Lara and Chris Gale, we've always lost in Sri Lanka comprehensively. So for me, that's not really a reason to get next. So looking at this year as a whole, I would say it's bordering on positive, I'd say. Mixed to positive, because the Bangladesh series was obviously good. So South Africa was the low point, but then you have the Pakistan series 1-1 against the Pakistan side paper were of a lot better quality. So I think they've shown a lot of perseverance in the test side. Obviously, there's a lot of questions to be answered, a lot of selection issues, but generally, I can't say in the context of recent years, I would say it's probably been a good year for Test cricket in the West Indies, results-wise.
I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. And the thing is, again, we need to be realistic. West Indian fans need to be realistic. I'm giving it 6 out of 10, but 6 out of 10 in recent West Indian cricket is good. and the reality of the situation is this. I always say, and I'm glad you provided the context of Sri Lanka, everything in context. We won 2-0 in Bangladesh. Let's go from top to bottom. We won 2-0 in Bangladesh. Last time we went to Bangladesh, we lost 2-0 and lost both test matches inside 3 days. That was the last time we went to Bangladesh. So anybody who wants to try and say to me, oh, the Bangladesh is just Bangladesh. Well, if it was just Bangladesh, we would have won the last time we went there as well, but we got humbled. Okay. So the 2-0 in Bangladesh, huge tick. The 0-0 at home against Sri Lanka, last time we played them in the Caribbean, we drew 1-1. So it was neither a decline or an improvement. I was upset with the tracks being so dead, but we didn't lose. I was disappointed with the South Africa performance because I thought we were on a high going into South Africa. I thought we could give a good account of ourselves, and we did with the ball, but we got blown away. We got blown away, and that was kind of like that was the first test of the year where we saw the shortcomings, the real shortcomings with the bat. So I was disappointed with that, and I think South Africa kind of showed us the levels and reminded us that no, we're not a mid-table side; we're lower mid-table at best.
Relegation,
yeah. But then also, we ain't beaten South Africa at home since 1992. So, in fairness, as much as it was humbling, it weren't like it was anything brand new to lose to South Africa at home. And then Pakistan 1-1. Obviously, epic first test in Sabina. Pakistan are a better test team than us. And actually, whether people want to admit it or not, 1-1 was a good result. The last time we played Pakistan in the Caribbean, we lost 2-1. Obviously, Shannon Gabriel and his nonsense, but we lost 2-1. So technically, again, in context, that was an improvement. And then Sri Lanka away, we got blown away in terms of the batting, but we've been blown away in Sri Lanka so many times that, don't get me wrong, it's disappointing, but you can't realistically look at that Sri Lanka performance and say to yourself, well, I'm very surprised that we didn't win a test in Sri Lanka. Like, do you know what I mean? So to me, it's a 6 out of 10. And yes, I totally understand the concerns people have with the bat. I share those concerns. I think, I know I want to see what you're saying at Santoki, where an opening batsman light, we're faced with the fact that we're about to go into an England series in March, probably with Solozano opening for his test debut now. So we're an opening batsman light. Our middle order is sketchy. We got Hope. The last test match we had Hope at 4, Chase at 5. There are huge question marks about that. Mayers is up and down the order. No one even knows where he's supposed to play anymore. Josh is down at 8, and people are saying, why is he even batting at 8? Shouldn't he be batting a bit higher? So there are question marks going into 2022 about our batting order. Not so much the bowling, not really perturbed in any way about the bowling, but we have a batting issue that I don't think can be solved in the short term. Like, you and I could be recording a mailbag episode a year from now and still be talking about the exact same issue.
Yeah, 100%. I think bowling hasn't been in for the test side because of the longevity of Roach and Gabriel, essentially, as the pillars of our bowling and the spinner that you can use and all rounder. So bowling's and never, as you said, the batting. And for me, a disappointment has been one thing about the West Indies. You look at what players, the likes of obviously Holder-led, Darwich, Hope, Chase, we've sort of persevered with them. And at some point, it was getting to the point of why are we so stubbornly sticking to this side? Because they're not young anymore. They're getting older and they're not performing. Now, because of the COVID and players pulling out, West Indies were forced to blood in new players. And they were initially a revelation. So Bonner, for instance, quality, one of the best batsmen for the year for West Indies. And then obviously Mayers came with a bang. Josh De Silva's made an impression. But then it's sort of like we've regressed now as the year's gone on. And we've gone back to the likes of Chase and Hope. And it's sort of, why is there stubbornness to pick with this cohort of players, rely on them, when we've shown that when we do bring in new players, such as a Bonner or Blackwood or some people who performed on a regional level, and they've added a sense of freshness to the side, why have we reverted back to the same cohort when we've seen what other options can do? Again, similar to the T20, it points to the fact is there a lack of options. The fact we've got Solozano opening, domestic average of 23 was it 25 going into a big England tour, so lack of options there. And as you said, I don't really know, we've talked about it so many times, but there's no obvious solution to how you resolve the batting issue. It's more systematic rather than any sort of individual failing. So for me, the batting's going to be a big question, most probably because of how England are, history of England and sort of England's fortunes in Test cricket. We probably will get a result against England in the series there, and that will kind of artificially raise confidence again in the region. But realistically, long term, we need to resolve how are we developing players to bat at the highest level? What do they need to do? And that's an issue which isn't going to resolve itself short term, but it's always going to be a problem for the Test side.
Most definitely. And do you know what? I'm not even going to come in on that because that probably links into our next question. It's probably a perfect segue because Jewel, and correct me if I say that wrong. I'm sure you're going to be listening to this. Do at us on Twitter or Instagram if I pronounce it wrong. But he said, how can we realistically build teams to be competitive in all three formats of the game?
Well, the thing is, you sort of touched on it earlier. For T20s, I guess it's weird. The onus isn't really on Cricket West Indies to develop. It's sort of players playing in franchise leagues. We've seen that from most sides. You play in the IPL, you play in the PSL. That's how you develop in T20 because it's such an evolving format. Just playing CPL like a Roston Chase does, for instance, or Brandon King. We've seen that make you develop because you're not learning new skills for different conditions and playing with the world's best, more importantly. So for T20, I guess to be honest, the likes of we've seen the likes of ODI and Smith and Romario Shepherd get Pakistan Super League deals recently, consistently playing in franchise tournaments throughout the year. And that's how you develop in T20 format. So I think that one sort of answers itself. I guess what we need to talk about is Test cricket. How do we realistically build a good Test side, a competitive Test side, one that can face South Africa at home and get a result or a series win? Need to do to reach that level. It's interesting because obviously today in the Pakistan, as of recording, in the first T20 match in Pakistan, Ian Bishop said, Nicholas Pooran, Mashal, Nicholas Pooran needs to play red ball cricket. That's the only way you're going to develop to help yourself in white ball cricket and also be an asset to the Test side. So, Mash, has your thought process changed? Do you still think the Test cricket side, we need to integrate more white ball players into that format to see improvements in the Test side?
Boy, I don't even know where to really start with this. What I would say is this. England and English fans are fun. Like, people need to understand that they're discussing the exact same issues we are. But the difference is they've got all the resources in the world to sort it out. And yet their top six can't bat either. So if we talk on Test cricket, first things first, obviously we need a regional game to come back. The red ball cricket season, which is due to come back in February. However, the cynic in me says, but even when the regional game did exist, it weren't like that was helping anybody. The famed professional cricket league that was set up under the last administration, the brainchild of Richard Pybus and Dave Cameron, has been in existence since 2014. What has it realistically led to? Now, Nkrumah Bonner, who's been our best batsman in Test cricket this year, granted, so some might say, hold a minute, you're contradicting yourself. Granted, he's come in off the back of a very good first-class season. But I'm saying that it's taken close to, 2014 to 2021? It's taken close to 6 to 7 years for a genuinely, what looks like, good first-class batsman to turn up in the side. Now, if anybody's saying, what are you talking about? Craig Brathwaite debuted 2012. Holder, Chase, Hope all came in 2015. Yes, you could argue they've come in off the back of PCL, but some of those players also came via the HPC, the High Performance Center out of Barbados, which obviously got shut down. So it's taken a long while for the Professional Cricket League to actually give us, I'm not even saying world class, obviously that's nonsense, give us some good players. And even then there's a lot of debate because the jury's still out on Mayers. Josh is still young. Blackwood was in the team anyway from way back. He actually went to HPC as well, incidentally. But Blackwood was in the team from way back. He's just worked on his game and come back in. And you look at Santolki, if I wanted to, I could go back to like 2017 era. Look at players like Vishal Singh when they got called in. That Vishal Singh was another player who, if I remember rightly, was averaging like high 30s. Maybe when he got his call up, he deserved his call up, incidentally, when he got called up after his performances for Guyana, got to Test level, scrambling. So it kind of goes back to that word you're talking about the issues are there's a systemic issue here which can't just be solved by picking the next player and then picking the next player. And as much as we laugh about Solazano getting picked off a first-class average of 23, the joke is that's kind of where we're at, though. That's kind of where we're at, where it's like, well, boy, we might as well pick that next guy there because what else are we supposed to do? And so before I come to you, because so much, The pitches need to be better. The level of the quality in the competition needs to be better. And by that I mean, can we go back to inviting Canada into the competition, or inviting the United States into the competition, or asking a touring English county side in their pre-season to come and play the competition? And I'm saying anything like that, all the way through to, can we identify a set of players, and can Cricket West Indies send them somewhere and say, you know what, we're not going to pick you for any international cricket for a while. We're investing in you by sending you to, I don't know, grade cricket in Australia, or first whatever cricket in South Africa, or what. Do you see what I mean? And then the third point I'd make is this generation done out anyway? Like, do we actually need to look at the next crop of, we've got an under-19 World Cup next year. Do we have to now look at the next crop of under-19s who will play the World Cup in the Caribbean at the start of 2022 and say, you know what, who out of this crop do we need to, kind of like similar to when Hetmeyer and that lot came through in 2016, only Hetmeyer and Alzari's actually got into the squad out of those two. The latest branch is just Jaden Seals at this moment in time. So is it about looking at the next crop and saying, let's not lose them, let's invest in them heavily and help their pathway, so by the time they're 22, 23, they're ready? Because if you look at someone like a Solozano, he's 26 going on 27, I think it is. Is he really going to learn the test game now? Do you see what I mean? So it's a whole heap of things, Santoki.
Yeah, and even, I mean, you made a lot of valid points there, Mash. Just to draw on the first one, even if you look at Bonner, he's going to be 33 soon. So he's not as if he sort of a youngster who broke through. He'd been playing his game in the regional level for a good 10, 11 years before he got through to the test side. And so at this point, you're wondering, did the regional system benefit him, or was it just the sheer experience of 11 years playing cricket at regional level meant that he was always going to adapt to test cricket? And another issue which you meant is obviously the pitches, underprepared pitches in the region, which means that a spinner like we've seen with Veerasamy Pamul obviously does well, but then this means our batsmen aren't exposed to pace bowling, effective pace bowling on the pitches. And it also means that they're not being prepared well on the regional level. So that means when they do go abroad, particularly to places like England, Australia, where pace bowling is prominent, they're not used to facing it to a high level. So it's loads of issues. And I think, remember we had Nikita Miller on the show, and he was essentially saying regional cricket at the moment is essentially mediocre players against mediocre players. So how are you going to develop if the person you're playing isn't at a great level anyway? So like you said, how do we get players out to play in? They're never going to play in county cricket realistically because of the lack of overseas slots that they have in English county, which obviously in the 70s and 80s, the likes of Viv Richards and Clive Lloyd, they plied their trade in the county circuit, and that's how they developed. That route is cut off for us. Obviously, you'll get the occasional player like Kemar Roach or Brathwaite will get a deal in county cricket, but that's only once they're established as world-class players. A youngster from the West Indies isn't going to get a deal at a county cricket club because there's too much finances involved. So at this point, how do you look at, and also the likes of a player in the current test side or over 25 isn't realistically going to go and play Australian grade cricket really at this point. So like you said, they've got to look at the next generation. So do we do like what Germany did in football and say, we're going to hold an L for the senior team for the next 10 years, but we'll develop our academy players? Well, I mean, we've been holding the L in senior cricket for about 20 years now in test cricket anyway. So at this point, do you just make it transparent? Do you just make it visible and say, listen, we're going to do what we can with our senior team. It is what it is. If they lose, they lose. But we're developing a cohort of youngsters and we're going to put them out. We're going to send some out to South Africa, play club cricket. We're going to send some out to play Australian grade cricket. We're going to try and see if they can play club cricket in England. We're going to put them in academies, develop them. So when they reach the age of 22, 23, we can start embedding them in the senior squad one by one. Is that what we're going to do? Or are we just going to try and focus this current test side, which, as you said, they're getting old now. Holder's 30. The likes of a Dalwich is coming up to 30. Blackwood's 30, I think. Craig Brathwaite, ironically, is probably one of the youngest of that cohort, and he's 29. So the cohort's getting to an age where they should be at their peak, but you feel they sort of remain stagnant because they haven't developed at all, really. So what is going to be the philosophy from Cricket West Indies? To be competitive, for me, that's the key. You have to look at how you're going to develop the next cohort. Because as blunt as it sounds, all is sort of lost with this current cohort. There's no way they're suddenly within the next year or two going to develop to be world-class players. We've seen them play for a good 5-6 years now.
Yeah, do you know? And I want to just do a quick cuss out of the previous administration, because when this current cohort of players, because as you say, Santoki, I think people forget that this lot have been playing for 6 years now. And when they got picked, I wonder if people remember that they all kind of came in at the same time, round about 2015, 2016. Obviously not Bonner and Mayers and that lot. I'm talking about the core. And they were kind of heralded as, we're going back to, because you remember, like, Cameron was like, we're jettisoning the stars. It was after the 2015 World Cup. They were like, we're jettisoning the franchise mercenary star players, and we're going with this new young crop of youngsters who love West Indies cricket. And they were kind of heralded as being the next great generation because they committed themselves to playing red ball cricket. So you had like Brathwaite, obviously he'd come earlier on, but Brathwaite, Holder, Dowrich, Chase, Hope, etc. Let's take those 5 names as an example, right? But and that's not me trying to say they're not good players, because somewhere in all of them there's a good player. Obviously Holder's world class as an all-rounder, but it was almost as if it was like, because they dedicated themselves to red ball cricket, they were heralded as being better than they actually were. Their peak probably came around 2017, 2018. That was no, but I'm serious. That was probably their peak.
You know why I'm laughing? Because I remember 2017, we played a series against, was it Zimbabwe? And I think we won the first test 1-0.
Yeah.
The second test, we held on for a draw. And we were even I was celebrating as if it was a 5-0 Blackwatch, you know, as if we finally won.
And actually, because then the next summer, Bangladesh toured and we destroyed them. I think both tests in 3 days, drew 1-1 with Sri Lanka. And because around that time, I was still like, yeah, this test side, this might be the one. Then we went to India and Bangladesh and got humbled at the end of 2018. Then actually, you made kind of reference this earlier on. England came in 2019. And because we won 2-1, I think everyone kind of said, well, it's almost like they let that victory paper over the cracks, it's almost as if they thought that 2-1 meant we'd been winning non-stop since 2015 or something, as opposed to it being like an anomaly in the grand scheme of things. So I just wonder if this cohort, who are all either 30 or approaching 30 or just over 30, actually may have already peaked. And that's not, before anyone gets me wrong, I'm not saying any of them are inherently bad players, but I just wonder if in this format of the game, they've actually already peaked. And actually, Santoki, a question I would put back to you: can Jayden Seales, what am I trying to say here? How long, and this isn't about T20, how long before Jayden Seales plays in this test team and starts to think, but this team's a waste team?
Listen.
You understand why I'm saying that, though?
I don't know if you got a bottle of Henny with you. We have to pour one out for his test career. It might already be done, Mash. We'll be watching those four test appearances as the glory days when Jayden Seales played for us. But yeah, I think for me, it's going to be hard because we've seen Jayden Seales play in the Lanka Premier League. It's going to, obviously, he's performed well. I think he got 7 wickets in his first 3 matches. He's obviously stood out there. Inevitably, we know the quality he has. He's going to get picked up by bigger franchise leagues. And then at this point, this leads to the question, any young player is going to question, why am I toiling for 5 days for a side that's most probably going to lose anyway for about 1/10, 1/20th of the fee that I'm getting for playing franchise cricket? And also, don't forget, test cricket hurts your body. So it's also hurting your asset in terms of earning money on franchise league. If you pick up an injury playing test cricket, you're not going to get the financial compensation you would have lost out on, say, an IPL deal or PSL deal. So for me, it depends on Jayden Seales, whether he feels like test cricket is sort of has the pull, the historic legacy. Is that enough for him to play it? Because out of choice, most probably you can imagine him playing franchise and becoming a quote unquote mercenary, as the previous administration would have labeled him. But going back to the question as well, how can we realistically build teams to be competitive in all 3 formats? I think you've obviously referenced England. I think if you look at the ECB, they've always sort of placed emphasis on one format at a time. So 2019, when they lost to West Indies in the Test series, it was because there was a massive emphasis on the World Cup that summer. So essentially, they'd given up resources on the Test team to focus on the ODI team, and this year they focused on the T20 team. Inevitably, when the Ashes series is at home in whatever 2 years, they'll focus on red ball cricket in the build up to that. So, is it unrealistic for us to think that teams in modern cricket can be performing all three formats of the game? Does West Indies just need to prioritize one format relative to the time period that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't say yes or no, but even if I said do that in T20, that doesn't guarantee we'd even still be any good. So I hear what you're saying. I just think we have to accept that for the foreseeable future, we are going to be a lower mid-table team in every format of the game until who are our world beaters right now, really and truly? Like in red ball cricket, it's Holder.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
In white ball,
red ball, maybe Roach.
I was going to say Roach, but I was going to say Roach, but only in certain conditions and circumstances. Yeah. Whereas Holder, you'd probably say in all conditions and circumstances.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And then in white ball, as much as people still don't want to hear it, because of his exploits around the world, you have to say Pollard. I know lots of people don't want to hear that in terms of his contributions to West Indies, but funnily enough, I pulled Pollard's data since he became captain in both ODIs and T20s, and he is significantly outperforming his career average in both formats of the game for West Indies. But people like the dunces who write in the Caribbean, let me not call any names, although they must know who they are. Dunces who write in the Caribbean will be like, Pollard should be dropped. He doesn't do anything for West Indies. But if I have to pull the data, I'll pull the data on these people. You know, he's significantly doing much better as a captain than his career average. So I'd put Pollard, probably Pooran and Hetmeyer because of their ceiling.
I mean, ODI, Shy Hope.
Hope in ODIs.
Evan Lewis, both formats.
Yeah, actually, Evan. Yeah, let's say Evan Lewis. So technically, just in terms of white ball cricket, arguably you'd say we should be putting more. If we're going to pick a format, look at one of the two white ball formats. But not all the tools are there. So the answer, I guess, to your question, Joel, how can we realistically build teams to be competitive? My overall conclusion is let's look at the next generation. Yeah, that's my overall conclusion, and looking at the pathways for the next generation and getting that right. But next question, Santelka, I'll let you jump in first. Tom Miller, shout out Tom Miller. He's the one who does all of our GIFs for all of our YouTube. What am I trying to say here? Shows that we do. Tom Miller does all of those. So shout out Tom. Tom says, what would a successful 2022 look like for West Indies? Before you answer those, Santelki, this is who we play in 2022. I was just looking at the Future Tours program. Start of the year in January, we play 3 ODIs in Gales Farewell against Ireland in the T20. England then come for 5 T20s and 3 tests. We then go to India in Feb for 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. We then go to June to play the Netherlands, which you and I are hoping to make it there for. Then Bangladesh come to the West Indies for 2 tests, 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. Then India come to the West Indies for 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. Then we go to South Africa to get licks in 2 tests, 3 T20s. Then it's the T20 World Cup. Then we go to Australia to play 2 tests and get absolutely destroyed. And then we go to New Zealand at the very end of the year for 3 ODIs. So,
the worst thing is, just thinking about that, the Australia tour, me and you are going to be up at 3 a.m. watching Shamar Brooks trying to bat off Pat Cummins.
that Australia tour is going to be an absolute shambles. A successful 2022 for West Indies. Bear in mind, there's a World Cup right near the end of it as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I was being big and bossy, I would say lifting the World Cup. But I think even us two at this point in time, we got to realize we're in the development stage. So we could still win a T20 World Cup. We saw what Australia did. They sort of pulled it out of the bag unexpectedly. So there is potential, but I'd say at this point, we definitely won't be favourites heading into Australia, not in the top 4 favourites to lift the World Cup. So realistic success, I would expect a series win in England for the tests, bearing in mind our history and the fact we've done it only 3 years ago. I think that would be, because it's a hard one, because there's so many polar opposites in a year. Like, you'd expect us to beat Netherlands, Ireland, Bangladesh. So beating them that wouldn't be it. But then at the same time, there's no chance we'll win in South Africa or Australia. So you've got like 0 to 100 essentially across the year. So it's about finding that middle ground. Where are the series where there's a 50-50 chance, and what can we pull off a result in? So for me, the England tour, there's a good chance we can get a result, but there's also a good chance England could potentially destroy us as well, bearing in mind their quality. So for me, getting a result in that England Test series for the Test year would define a successful time. ODIs, I would say ODIs and T20s. I'm not expecting us to get results in India. It's very hard. Occasionally, we've lost series 2-1 here and there, so we could get one win. But India in the Caribbean, I'd expect us to win both series. If we can do that, bearing in mind the T20 World Cup will only be a month or two after that, that will as well be a big success. And yeah, I think Australia, South Africa, I'd be surprised if we won. Well, what we play in test, we won't win anything. There's white ball games, we might pick up 1 or 2 consolation wins, but realistically, we can't. It's similar to Sri Lanka last month. We can't expect much, really. So for me, the success is really hinging on India tour in the Caribbean and the England tour.
Yeah, you've taken the words out of my mouth. And if people think we're going to be pessimistic, we are going to lose, unless it rains, we're going to lose 2-0 to South African Test and 2-0 to Australia. Thank God it's only 2 tests, because if it was any longer, the days of 5 tests in Australia, thank God, are over. So we're just going to take our 2-0 L in Australia and South Africa, and that's going to be that. The 3 ODIs in New Zealand at the end of the year, I mean, if we could win a cheeky ODI versus New Zealand, I think that would be successful. But generally, I think you're right. It's the England tour and the India tour where I'd like to see some victory. I'm not saying an out-and-out victory, but some victories I would like to see. And then I'm going to take it a bit more forensic and say, and also, well, in terms of T20 World Cup, winning more than one game would be successful. So first and foremost, qualifying for the actual World Cup, and then because remember we have to qualify for it. So qualifying for the World Cup would be successful, and then winning more than one game would be successful. But in terms of expecting us to win the tournament, no, that's not happening. The other thing I would say would be successful for West Indies is if, and I'm talking purely, I guess, Test cricket. Successful would be by the time we go to South Africa and Australia, having some new players in the team.
Yeah.
Some new players in the team who have managed to establish themselves like Bonner has. I don't know who those players are going to be. I couldn't tell anybody who that's going to be right now. But just this time next year, when we're getting licked in Australia, or have been licked in Australia, I would like to think that our Test team looks different to the Test team that's just ended this year, and we actually have some new names to get excited by, and that to me would be successful.
I'd like to see players. Obviously, we're finally getting regional cricket back after 2 years. I'd like to see new players sort of put their hands up in the regional scene and eventually make the Test side by the end of the year. Because, like you said, I think even if we win the Test series in England with a squad which looks like the squad we've got at the moment, that would sort of paper over the cracks, really. It wouldn't be a long-term solution to our fortunes. So I'd like to see new players, like you said, De Silva, Bonner, Mayers, new players come in and integrate themselves into the side and sort of step up. That would be good looking forward long-term beyond 2022 if we could get a new cohort of players integrated.
Yeah, and it's also worth shouting out before we forget, also in 2022, Under-19 World Cup at the start of the year. So doing well in that. Obviously, it's in the Caribbean. And also the Women's World Cup is next year. Is it not? It's next year?
Yeah, it's February.
Yeah. So the Women's World Cup as well, the West Indies women doing well in that. And it may well be that the Under-19s and the West Indies women outperform the men anyway. So doing well in those particular competitions would be successful as well. But then kind of the inverse of that question from Shakes is, well, what's the greatest challenge we face in 2022? Shout out Shakes.
Boy, I think there's so many. Well, firstly is, I guess COVID is always going to be a challenge, especially for the region. Obviously, at the moment, we've got a new variant going around. We don't know how that will affect the new regional season going ahead. We're the only international side in the world at the moment who haven't had regional cricket since the pandemic began, obviously because of the makeup of the different islands and stuff. So that would be a great challenge. We know the best versus best matches aren't a suitable replacement for a long period of regional cricket. So for me, a challenge is obviously the variant, COVID, getting the regional system even done in the on the islands would be an achievement. Going forward as well, we've sort of touched on it with Jaden Seals, but also how do we keep players like ODI and Smith, Dominic Drakes? How do we keep them in the West Indies setup where franchise leagues calling? Are we able to do that? How do we find a balance? Is there going to be more communication between Cricket West Indies and these players to kind of make sure that they are playing for West Indies still, or are we going to lose players to the franchise circuit? So for me, that's another challenge as well. And what else could we say? I guess those are of immediate concern. Those are the two big things for us because, like you said, we're at a stage across all three formats where we're transitioning. So we need to. Are we going to get these young players into the West Indies setup, or if we lose a Jaden Seals to franchise cricket, for instance, that's a world-class bowler we've lost from the test side. So how do we balance it? How do we sell test cricket to a Jaden Seals? So I think administrators and player communication is going to be a big challenge for 2022.
Yeah, you've just hit the nail on the head, but I'm going to go a different way with the administration part. So I've got three different things I think will be challenges in 2022. And I agree with all of yours, but one, say a challenge, this has been a challenge since the dawn of time, but insularity is going to be a challenge. I do not believe that all of the territories are singing from the same hymn book with regards to West Indies cricket. I think there is far too much. There's far too much. What am I trying to say here? People are trying to win personal battles.
Yeah.
Different cricket boards are trying to win personal battles. We aren't, before anyone tries to accuse us of being fanboys of Ricky Skerritt or Fellow, it's not about that. And it's not about whether we agree with Cricket West Indies or not. But what I do know is we can't move cricket forward in the region if people are more interested in winning particular battles and trying to show up Cricket West Indies. And don't get me wrong, good journalism has to happen and difficult questions have to be posed and answered. So we're not critiquing that. But let me fire some shots, Santoki. Fire some shots. And if this reaches certain people, it was me who fired the shots. Me.
Wow.
So radio stations and shows like Mason and Guess, if you lot are gonna, I'm speaking direct to you lot when you listen to this. If you lot are gonna do your shock jock type stuff and try to look for gotcha moments instead of actually trying to come up with answers for how to move cricket forward, then what are you actually bringing to the discussion? You lot ain't serious. You're not actually serious about trying to bring West Indies cricket forward. You're just out there trying to catch out people. I said that, So fire off. Hear that. Cuss me out after you've heard this and come fire back with your barbs. Because you men ain't serious. So yeah, that's me.
Listen, that wasn't pre-planned, That caught me off guard as well, man. So dropping diss tracks live on the pod. But yeah, 100%. I support what you're saying. Yeah.
The insularity is a madness. And the one thing we pride ourselves on in Caribbean Cricket Podcast is, yes, Santoki bigs up Guyana, and from time to time I'll big up Jamaica. But the joke is, the actual point is, we actually support West Indies. We actually support West Indies. It's not actually about what's the best for Guyana or what's the best for St. Kitts or what's the best for Jamaica. It's just what's best for West Indies. I'm not convinced everybody's really got that in mind. And before you come in, Santoki, just two other things I want to throw out there. There's going to be a challenge faced from, I think people want Phil gone. Yeah. Not a lot of people. I don't think it's a lot, but social media makes a lot of noise. And I think there's going to be a push to try and get Phil out. I'm not saying that I'm agreeing. I'm not even going to say I'm disagreeing. I'm just saying I think there is going to be a push to try and get Phil out. And the other challenge as well is the batting. Ultimately, the batting in the region is a problem, and I don't think it's as simplistic. Like lots of people, you'll read things like we need to bring in Desmond Haynes, or we need to bring in Brian Lara, or we need to bring in Shiv. These type of comments are so reductive because That's like saying, right, a team's not scoring. You need to bring in Ian Wright, and that's going to suddenly help the team score. Like, if the quality isn't there, it's never going to be fixed by just saying bring in this one man and that's going to suddenly solve the problem. So there is a systemic batting problem in the region, which is an ongoing challenge we're going to face. But that's my shot, Santoki.
Yeah, no, 100%. I back what you're saying. I'm supporting the diss track out here. I think insularity is always probably been a massive problem, but we've noticed it more and more recently. I mean, you've had politicians complaining about exclusion of players in the side, which no other country in the world does. Like you said, it's sort of like you got clickbait articles. There was obviously, we're the only team going into the World Cup who our players and our coaches had to plead with to stop being so negative and support the team. We had Pollard having a go at Guyanese journalists taking it as an affront to Guyana. It's just a lot of insularity. I don't really know how you end it with all the island politics, which has sort of been prominent in the cricket scene for as long as I've known it. But it's obviously a massive hindrance to sort of unity of the team and trying to work a way to move forward if everyone sort of got their own agenda. And as you said, it isn't helped when leading and prominent radio shows and journalists, like you mentioned, Mason and Guest, and a prominent Guyanese Sunday column that sort of emerged, which is just illogical to the highest degree, are coming out, and those are kind of getting traction with their ideas and stuff. So for me, like you said, I think the politics insularity of the region is always going to be a challenge. But as you said, it's a massive challenge in 2022. How do we sort of unite the region and go forward? I don't think there is a solution to it, but if there isn't, there's always going to be an obstacle in the development of West Indies cricket.
One of these days, I've already got someone in mind, but one of these days we need to do an episode on the death of the West Indian Federation and why there isn't a greater fostering of a Caribbean community, and maybe, in fact, Santoki, maybe we benefit because at the end of the day, we live in the UK. Is it easier for the diaspora to see the Caribbean as a whole than it is for people back home in individual islands and countries to not put their nation first? That's a podcast episode we probably need to touch on, but there's some questions to be raised about all that.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, it's going slightly off topic, but from family and friends I know in the Caribbean, it's because of air prices and the cost. It's very unlikely that, like, a Guyanese person won't just go on holiday to like St. Lucia or Antigua, for instance. They don't get to see the different islands. A lot of them obviously don't travel that much within the region, so that could play a part. Whereas, as you said, in the diaspora, me and you know each other. I'm Guyanese, you're Jamaican. You could go to a Trinidadian shop, you'll meet a St. Lucian on the street. There's sort of more of you come into contact with people from different islands a bit more. So that could be a reason as to why there's so much insularity. It could be just because, like you said, there's not that sort of view of the Caribbean being one sort of unity, a sort of island versus island, which you don't get in the diaspora, because we have sort of become a melting pot in America and Canada and England of just all West Indians sort of know each other and kind of sort of stick together. So that could be a sociological reason as to sort of why there's different views and stuff.
Anyone who's listening to that and was like, boy, that's the most interesting thing you said on the podcast, hit us up. Hit us up, get in touch with us. And if you want to feature on a podcast episode, or you think you know someone who want to feature on a podcast episode, someone's probably going to say like Hilary Beckles, Medvis, one of the listeners to our podcast. I know you're big on all that kind of diaspora discussion. So hit us up if you'd like us to do a bit more on something like that. But our last question before we end this particular episode of the mailbag, and it's probably the best question to end it on. Big up Chris Lim, big supporter of the podcast. He says, name a 2025 West Indies Test side. And the thing is, Chris, we both saw this question, and it's actually a really difficult question to answer because effectively that's, let's say, 4 years from now, even though we're about to turn to 2022, effectively you're saying 4 years from now. So Craig will be 33. I'm just going for the ages. Jermaine Blackwood would be 35, going on 35. Holder would be 34. Mayers would be 32. Bonner would be 37. Oh, this team's magic. Bonner would be 37. Chase would be 33, going on 34. Roach would be 37, so he's gone. Gabriel would be 37. So In 4 years, Santoki, we're supposed to be having a brand new team, you know. That's what I can't. I'm already going to say that I'm not even sure I can name it at this stage because we've had 2 years of no first class cricket, so I don't even know. Like hand on heart, can I say with any level of confidence that I really know what's going on in first class cricket, having not seen anything happen now for 2 years? So it's probably better we say some names to watch out for.
Yeah, I was going to say, bearing in mind, generally international cricketers at test level retire around 34, 35. But based on it being 3-4 years from now, most of the side would be verging on retirement, essentially. So if you're looking at, I think it's better to address this question as sort of going forward in 3-4 years, what young players do we see making the step up to test cricket? And I guess, obviously, we mentioned Jayden Seales. It'd be great if he was still playing test cricket in 2025. He would be leading the bowling attack, you'd imagine, if he was playing test cricket in 2025. There's a few others as well. Under 19, I guess, Matthew Nandu, the opener. He put in some good performances against England, I know, last year. And it'll be interesting to see what he can do in the World Cup. In Guyana, at least, there's a lot being spoken about him. Obviously, an opener as well. He's 18, so you never know in 2-3 years. He could fill the opener spot that we've been looking for. Kimani Melius from St. Lucia. He's seen more as a white ball player, but I've heard he's also prominent in red ball cricket as well. So he's someone multi-format who could come in. I think he's about 20, 21. I'm trying to think who else, Mash. Who else should we keep an eye out for? So
I've got a few names that I'm throwing in there. I don't even know why I'm throwing these names in there, but we have to. I'm going to throw, these are the names I've written down. Brandon King.
Okay, interesting.
Just because, and if you've never listened to it, go back and listen to our podcast with Brandon King, which we did last year. But Brandon was never supposed to make his debut for West Indies in white ball cricket. He was earmarked as a red ball cricketer. And then he had that breakout season with the Amazon Warriors at the time. So I haven't ruled out Brandon. Jide Gooley, I think a lot of people are looking at him. I don't know what's going on with Tej Narain Chanderpaul. I don't know if he's now decided he's going to be a white ball player, but Tej is one of the few players in the Caribbean that occupies the crease. So I will be put this way: when first class returns in Feb, I'm going to be watching what Tej Chanderpaul is doing quite significantly. Lots of people have been talking to me saying, look at Casey Carty again. He was in that 2016 team with Hetmeyer and co., which then leads me to Hetmeyer. Remember, Hetmeyer is still only 24. Now, I don't know where you stand on Hetmeyer, Santoki. I reckon he might be done, with red ball cricket. There's a sneaky part of me which is like, I wonder if Hetmeyer is actually done with the format. But if he's not, Hetmeyer should be in there. And similarly, you tweeted something a few weeks back, maybe a month ago. The window to get Pooran into the test squad is getting smaller and smaller. I'm now saying by the month, never mind the year. If Nicholas Pooran doesn't debut next year, I'm going to say he's never playing for West Indies in red ball cricket.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the time frame's getting smaller and smaller. He's at his peak now. He should be at his peak now, coming to his mid-20s. So he's someone who we just need to make a decision. Is he going to, at the moment, it's sort of wavering because there was never any notion of him playing test cricket until he played those warm-up games in New Zealand. And it was sort of like, hold on, he's playing red ball cricket now, 4-day cricket. There must be a bigger reason for this. And then sort of since there, we've not had any clarification. Has he been approached? Has he been told he has to play domestic cricket? Has he said he's not interested in test cricket? What is going on with Pooran? And this has just led to endless speculation. Hetmeyer, my gut feeling is, like you said, I don't know if he'll persist with test cricket. He gets IPL deals. He gets big franchise deals. Is it worth for him trying to persist with test cricket when he's been dropped before? It's a hard format to sort of adapt to and play. Is he just going to say, you know what, I'm a white ball player, 50 over T20, let's go? It'd be a shame because I think in that 2025 West Indies side, Hetmeyer could be the captain that you build the side around if he went on the same trajectory as his talent is capable of. But unfortunately, I think we haven't seen. When did he last play test? 2019, I think. So already that's 2 years missed out of him, 2 vital years. I don't know if we'll see him play domestic cricket this year, which means he probably won't play test cricket. At this point, how long are you going to leave it? So ideally, I'd love to see, in the 2025 side, I'd love to see Pooran and Hetmeyer as sort of the fundamental components of the test side, but it's unlikely we'll see either, which is a massive shame for cricket, I think.
Yeah, and then the only other few names I've got is Josh Da Silva. I'd expect to still be around, obviously, and then from that under-19 team, there's a lot being said about a boy called Teddy Bishop, so look out for him. And then also Jamal Holder, I think will be around, possibly Keon Harding, but also Alzari's still young.
Yeah,
Alzari's still young, so I wouldn't rule out Alzari Joseph. Well, so there's players there, but I mean, boy. I think the best thing we can say to everyone is let's see what happens, assuming that we actually get to play it and COVID doesn't have the impact it may or may not have. Let's just see what happens in this year's first class season, and then we can come back to that conversation about is anybody looking to really make an impact in the region. But Santoki, we've just clocked in at over an hour. We thought it'd be around the hour mark, and that was only 5 questions. So I hope everyone who's been listening to this particular episode has found those as thorough as they could be. Some shots were fired. We look forward to hearing the counter shots when this goes out in the Caribbean. But as ever, people, interact with us. Send your messages at Carib Cricket, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Any last words, Santoki?
No, just thank you for all our supporters as ever. As Mash said, interact with us. We're keen to hear your opinion. If you think we're anti-Bayesian, if you agree with us, just let us know. We're all here for an educated debate. So yeah, listen to this show. Any feedback, hit us up on social media, whether you agree or disagree. We just love to hear your opinion.
So thanks, Santoki, and like we say, keep listening to Caribbean Cricket Podcast. We think we've got one more episode ready to drop before the end of 2022, so we won't say Happy New Year and all that. We think we've got one more that we're going to record before the end of the year, so look out for that for episode 54. But that's been episode 53 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules